Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Welcome to today's webinar. It's about using Dyalog APL and Microsoft Excel. I guess the thing that I'm aiming for today is to sort of give you an introduction for those who might be interested in using these technologies together, and demonstrating sort of the basic ways, you can get into using APL and Microsoft Excel together. You're probably watching this because you already use APL and you know how good it is for data processing. So why do you want to talk to Microsoft Excel? The main reason is that, honestly, it's so ubiquitous still. Used in lots of different domains, lots of different people use it. I remember starting to learn it even in school. It's good for data entry and processing and doing graphics and lots of other things. So, there are lots of situations where you might either be receiving data in Excel format or wanting to interact with Excel in some way. Well, I guess if you have Excel, then, why do we want APL? Well, you'll know that it's great for data processing, especially arrays, and the APL array model fits quite nicely with spreadsheets, right? So a spreadsheet itself definitely looks like a matrix, but also even a workbook, a collection of spreadsheets, can be thought of like a three-dimensional array, for example. So I've read some of the documentation and Richard Proctor's excellent tutorial document from some workshops he's done. And I've tried to simplify what I saw down to what I'm calling these 4 modes of operation. And these are ways of interacting with Microsoft Excel things. And even though I tried to boil it down to 4 things, as it were, it still ended up being, it's quite a lot of content. So for the best part of this hour, you're going to watch me demonstrate interacting with Microsoft Excel and Excel files using Dyalog APL. So for the most part, you can watch me demonstrate these things. But if you happen to be watching live on dialog.tv, there is a chat box down below. Adam is in there. And he will relay your questions. He has a question already. Will this work with Excel of Mac OS? As in the OLE stuff. The Dyalog in Excel interprocessing in the second half of the webinar, I'm doing all in Microsoft Windows, and I have not tested it and don't know if it will work with Mac OS. However, the first part, reading files and writing to files using Dyalog, as of very recently, will work on Windows, macOS, and Linux. So the first part is cross-platform, so it doesn't, matter if you have Excel installed where your Dyalog application is running. You can still handle Excel files, but I don't know if the interprocessing will work with Excel on macOS. I'll have to find out and put it in the description or comments or something later. I think, yes, to start with, okay, let's put the tiniest piece of context here. Imagine your application is a Dyalog application written in APL, and it can be acquiring data from all kinds of places, from the internet, or perhaps you're reading from databases or files, or you're just performing computations and you need to output that data, or someone is sending you data, or you found some data that happens to be in Microsoft Excel format already. How can we read that data in, do some basic processing, and then perhaps even write that out? That's what I'm going to demonstrate first. So As I said, cross-platform. So let me jump to my virtual machine here. This is a Linux virtual machine running Ride, the remote IDE. And if we look at the version information, you can see, let me know, hope this is big enough font. Probably scroll it one more. I'm running Dyalog version 18, and you can see here I have .NET 3.1.4 installed, and that's the .NET Core for Linux. The .NET Core runtime there. And that's what's allowing me, or is going to allow me to read and write these Excel files with relative ease. Given that the format is, there's a sort of open specification for it, I imagine you can write some .NET-less utility to do this, but .NET is what we have. Font was fine. Let's put it back. So, to do this, I'm looking at this one folder. This one I can't increase the font, unfortunately, as easily, or at least I'm not exactly sure how. And even though this is a folder on the Windows host machine, we're going to be using this place as where, we're going to be reading from book1.xlsx and doing our data processing and writing files to the same directory so that we can see all of it happening in one place, even though this first demo is happening from the Linux virtual machine. So if I do --cd, you can see I'm in this place, which is a mounted virtual drive from the host machine, from the Windows machine. I think even quad shls will show you the same files there. Oh, and I've got PowerPoint open, hence the temporary file here. So that makes sense. So, first thing I want to do is read some data in. To do this, I'm going to be using the Excel to APL tool from the Carlisle group. Now, fair warning, as of right now today, the code on this repository only works on Windows with the .NET framework, but I've made a fork, which I'll give you a link to at the end, and that has some updates which allow it to work on Dyalog version 18 using the .NET Core bridge coming in version 18. And soon enough, I think I either have or will submit a pull request, and that code can go into the main project. So, to the virtual machine, I want to start by bringing in the code for Excel to APL. It's an Acre project, so if you're using Acre Desktop, you can use their user commands to load the project to open it up. But just for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to use link import Excel to APL, if I can type, and I think I know the path, GitHub, Excel to APL, Apple source, the APL source. So now we have that in the Excel to APL namespace. I'm also going to copy some functions in from another workspace where I've pre-prepared some functions. We have the APL OLE namespace, which you'll find out why it's named that soon enough. Excel to APL is what I've just imported. And then I also have this cover function called import sheets, which simply just calls two functions from Excel to APL, using a right argument of a file path, and it will bring in the sheet data into the workspace. So if I say my sheet gets, and the name was book1.xlsx, with any luck, there it goes. And if I look at sheet1.data, you can see I have, to be fair, there is only one sheet in that book. But yeah, you can see it's imported it as an inverted table instead of a nested matrix or something, because that's a bit more efficient in space, but you just need to be aware of it when you want to handle the data. So now let's do some incredibly arbitrary data processing. So if you look in my APL OLE namespace, the two main functions that we're just going to use are just primes and just vals. You'll see what they do now. First thing I can do is get the primes. I think this works. Just primes. We want the first, and we'll need to execute because Excel to APL, the Carlyle Group utility function, reads the data in as an inverted table, but all the data is character data by default. In fact, yeah, it gets imported as character data, and it's up to the user to decide what to do with it. So I'm going to execute each row to convert to numeric. The first of sheet 1.data. And in fact, if I just do this, oops, and remember to dot into the namespace. Okay, there we go. So it's 0 unless the numbers are prime. That's all it does. And we also want some vowels. So APL OLE, just vowels. The second sheet 1.data. I might need to split this. Can't remember. Yes. Just vowels. Table split. Right, there we go. So it's all the words from before, but now it's a nested column matrix, and it's just the vowels. So if we look at our data now, all right, let's skip through this slightly more boring bit. You'll see it once or twice more. We have our numbers, and it's going to be best if it's going to be easiest to see if we do this. I didn't call them anything. Okay, should have done that first. Numbers is execute rank 1, the first of sheet 1.data. Have a look at there. Okay, and similarly the words. For convenience, I'm going to split those to pick sheet 2.data. Okay, so now I've got my numbers, which I said I wanted to split up in table as well, just for the convenience of writing it to the file in a second. My primes. Really? Interesting. Oh, yeah, of course. You for real? Yeah, it is numbers. I just need to table it. What a doofus. Okay. And then the primes. Yep. And then see my words. Yep. And just the vowels. Okay, this is what I wanted. So, excuse me for that mess. Now I've got a nested matrix, which is kind of in a format that looks a bit more Excel-ish, and this is just for the sake of convenience when it comes to right now. I've done my data processing. I'm sure in the real world it'll be a bit more useful than this. But now I want to write my file and export it as Excel as well. So for this, I'm going to pop to the GitHub repository just to help just to jog my memory about the process. So, including the fact that at this point it's worth mentioning the object model of Excel, right? So Excel operates in the component object model, and so this is basically a way of exposing all the sort of methods and objects and items and properties in Excel stuff as in an object-oriented framework which other applications can access, including Dyalog APL. So we have these concepts like a workbook or even a collection of workbooks as an object, and then within a collection of workbooks we can have a workbook, and that's also an object. And within workbook we can have sheets, which are also objects, and it's objects all the way down until we get to the ranges, And then the values inside the ranges from the APL perspective are basically going to just be arrays, like all other, sort of data values in APL. So this is just so you know why I'm going to be creating a lot of namespaces right now. So the process for using, and which we haven't even loaded yet, I'll do that just now, APL to Excel. So let's import APL to Excel, home, windoc, GitHub, if I can spell correctly, APL to Excel, applesauce. Okay, the process of writing an Excel file using APL to Excel is fairly straightforward. You start by creating the ranges and populating them with your data. So we'll create range 1 as an empty namespace. The range 1 value for me is going to be the 2 take rank 1. So I'm going to take the first 2 columns of my big data munge up here. So the first 2 columns. And then we also specify an Excel address. So I just want it in the top left. So that's going to be A1. Now I'm going to create another range, and hopefully this whole process will seem boring to you in a moment, if not already. Dot value gets the 2 drop rank 1 of all of this stuff. So now I just want the last 2 columns, the words and the vowels, and make sure to have an address. This is also going to be A1 because I intend to put it on a separate sheet so it can have that A1 address. So now I'm going to create some sheets and populate those. Once again, it's empty namespaces. Sheet 1. Oh, you can't see behind the picture in picture. I had a thing for that, but I thought I would remember to change it. Okay, we're back. So we've created 2 ranges. They have the same address, but that's because I'm going to put them into separate sheets. So the first sheet is another empty namespace. That sheet's name, I'm going to call it vowels. Oh no, we're doing primes first. And the sheet 1 ranges is just R1. Then a second sheet, you guessed it, another empty namespace. We're going to name it this one vowels, and the ranges is just going to be range 2. So if you wanted 2 ranges in a single namespace, you should be careful to make sure that your data doesn't overlap in terms of the starting address and then the shape of your overall data, which is almost definitely going to be a matrix. So now that we've created our ranges and populated some sheets, we've got the addresses and the names, which is basically the minimum requirements. If you look on the GitHub repository, there's documentation, giving all the other fancy things you can do. Not every Excel document feature is implemented as far as I'm aware, but there's lots of things that you can do. So a workbook, since it's another object, is just another empty namespace. We require a file name, and this is where the fun begins. So we're going to call it book1processed.xlsx, and then it's going to have some sheets, which is just sheet 1 space and sheet 2 stranded together. And finally, APL to Excel .main.export the workbook object. And as if by magic, we've written from a Linux virtual machine, albeit onto a Windows file system, a new Excel workbook. And I can show you this. It has 2 sheets, one called primes and one called vowels, and it has the data from a second ago. So there you go. Hopefully it feels fairly straightforward to read and write APL. You know, I haven't had to do anything like opening it up in Excel and exporting as a CSV and then using Quad CSV. I can just use the files directly there, which is, you know, very convenient. So that's cross-platform, reading and writing Excel files directly. The next pair of demos, as I mentioned, is more inter-processing. So using actual, you know, Dyalog processes. One of them's like a DLL, and otherwise you could have a running Dyalog application. And this is using something called OLE, Object Linking and Embedding, to directly communicate between Dyalog processes and Excel processes that are actually running. You say turn on pip, but I've got a feeling, you know what, you can have my face for a little bit, but I think I'm going to need to turn it off again in a second. So COM is the sort of framework with, you know, all these objects that can be shared between applications, and then the method to communicate between processes, between applications is OLE. So the first of these, on the penultimate demo, is Dyalog as a client. So we're going to have the Dyalog session open, and we're going to control Microsoft Excel from inside the Dyalog session. So in this case, we're going to use 17.1 for this. It's Windows using the .NET framework, or no, this is OLE. It works in 17.1. This is not a new feature. No, I don't want to save. Another thing is that the sort of typing is a little bit more fiddly, and I don't trust myself as much, so I've written a demo script to help me through this. I understand that that can make me tempted to go very fast, so I'm going to try and keep my pace, just go one thing at a time. I should mention one little gotcha that got me when I started preparing this stuff and looking into using Excel with Dyalog. On Windows 10 at least, I had this sort of version of Office 365 where I could go into the Start menu and I could open Excel, and for all intents and purposes, I had Excel installed. I could read and write Excel files and do all the normal things. But when I tried to create an OLE client, it couldn't find the Excel stuff. That Dyalog couldn't find the Excel stuff that it needed. So it turns out you need to go to office.com with your license information or Microsoft login and download a full version of Office so that you're able to use the OLE stuff. So just try and remember that, because otherwise you'll spend a while wondering why it's not working, as I did. Right, yeah, we're about to get into covering up with my face territory, so let's go back here. Oop, didn't do that. Right, so as I said, demo script. I don't want to go too fast, and also, you know, my voice is, I'm using my voice a bit much, so for now...
Microsoft Excel speaks for me now.
That's right. If you use OLE with Excel, you don't even have to talk.
Let's open Excel and connect to the workbook.
So I'm connected to the workbook, but if I want to see the changes live, I need to set Excel.visible to 1. So now we can see the workbook, which is the same as before, our book 1, just as we'd read in on Linux a moment ago. We have a collection of workbooks as an object in the workspace now. So That's how we can tell how many we've got, right? Open, even if we might not be able to see them.
We can refer to a sheet by name or number.
So you can index into your collection of workbooks either by number, I guess depending on the order in which you opened them, but more conveniently you can index using the name of a book. Obviously, be careful about conflicts.
Let's name a sheet.
Again, for convenience, we can assign the references to these objects to names, just so we don't have to keep typing out these long strings of names and dots.
We can count the used rows, columns and cells.
So in this workbook, there are 16 used rows and 2 used columns, and between that there's 32 used cells. That does include those empty cells on the right, on the B column, so I'm supposing it keeps the whole rectangular array thing, just like APL.
And read the data.
So this is, just as easy as a moment ago. In this case, it's convenient to take the used range value 2. So value 2 in Excel is kind of like the raw data, as it were. The thing called value is, I guess, a bit more complicated. It has the ability to store date-time formats or currency formats. But APL, we can't really represent those, so we just stick to the value 2s. And you'll also notice that those empty cells, as before, get imported as oops. Okay, someone have to tell me how long that's been going on. Let's go back. Adam can tell me whether I already read the data. Presumably you saw the rows, counting the rows, columns and cells. Also, I will upload all of the materials from this to GitHub repository after. So by tomorrow, the link in the what? Okay, now that's new. That's not me. That's Nettle Down. Okay, we're back. Apologies for this. Adam's going to update me on how far we got before I completely almost screwed the pooch again. Am I allowed to use that phrase? So, hopefully we got as far as, okay, as I was saying, we can count the used rows and columns and cells, and we can read the data in using this value 2 thing. Hopefully explained. Value 2 is like the raw data. Value can include date times and currencies, but APL can't really represent those, so we stick to the value 2s. Okay, just continue. And as I said, all the materials will go on a GitHub repo, blah, blah, blah. So you can go over this and review the stuff that I'm actually using. Blank cells become quad nulls, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we've read our data in as the numbers and words. Brilliant. Let's continue. Sorry about that.
Now let's process our data. Okay,
so this is using the exact same functions as before. So I copy the stuff from APL Excel workspace. That's the exact same workspace as I was using a moment ago in Linux. There's our primes. There's our just vowels.
We can write our data to a new workbook.
So let's do that. So it's as simple as workbooks add 1, and we can even, assign the references to names as we do it. So here's my new workbook that's just spawned from the ether. It has a name. It's called, I don't know if you can read that very well, Sheet 1, but we can verify this. Yep, it's called Sheet 1. We can also save this workbook. So now you can see the name has changed, and also in my folder I've named it Book 1 OLE, and there's Book 1 OLE all of a sudden. Very nice. Now we have 2 workbooks open in our workbook collection. Let's assign our new book. Did I even need to do that? Not sure. And now here's the fun magic bit. We just dot into our sheets, the first sheet, Sheet 1, or we could, I believe we can refer to that by name as well, dot range, and then using Excel letter number combination named ranges. So we're going to be filling A1 to D1 with our header, and you just take the value to and assign values, as if by magic. Then we can also fill in the rest of our data. Super convenient. In fact, I didn't even need to do 2 assignments there. Whatever's convenient for your situation, but you could even do just numbers, primes, provided that your APL data is in a sort of appropriate format. So actually, to demo this, I'm going to need to just fill with nonsense, and then go back and fill with our correct data. So you can do sort of bulk assignments like this. It's very convenient. And finally, I'm done. I want to save and close this workbook, and I can email it to my friends. If I use, workbook.close1, then it will close and save. If I use close 0, then it closes the workbook but doesn't save. And a clear workspace. Alright, so that was controlling Excel from inside the Dyalog session, and obviously you could take all that same stuff and do it programmatically from inside your application or whatever you want. That's how straightforward it is. So, finally, this is actually my favorite one. It's very cool. It's basically writing APL functions, writing Excel functions in APL, kind of. Check everything's all good. Sorry about this. Yep. Whoa. So the reason I think this is the coolest one is, again, sort of because of my experience with Excel. So I guess we want this here. No, we don't need that yet. Basically, Dyalog allows you to take a namespace containing some methods, some functions, and even some data, I suppose, and export it as what's called an OLE server. And again, when I link to the documentation near the end, you can read in there and see, a lot more of the details. I'm just going over the sort of surface stuff here. But there's, in-process or out-of-process servers, where I think the main advantage of an in-process server, which is the one I'm going to demonstrate, the main advantage of in-process is that it's fast, because the Dyalog functions, your APL functions, get loaded into the same process as Excel where they're being used. But out-of-process servers allow you to use what's called DCOM, or is that distributed COM, component object model, And that means you could have a single OLE server, so you have your APL functions in a single server, which can be accessed by several different processes, or even several processes possibly over a network. So those are kind of your main considerations there. Yes, so how do we make such a thing? I think we can do it like this. So I've cleared my workspace, but one thing I will do is just copy again APL Excel. So okay. So, you know, the exact same set of functions as before. We're going to ignore import sheets. That was just for the first part. But we had this APL OLE namespace. Yep. And in there we have these functions which I've been using, you know, just primes and just vals to process the data. But I don't want to have to even run a Dyalog session or my Dyalog application to use these. Let me use them directly from Excel itself. How do we do this? The steps are actually really straightforward. If you have such a namespace, you can do your namespace. Because I'm really sorry about that. It's because my APL keyboard shortcuts are conflicting with my streaming shortcuts, so I'll have to sort that out for the future. So quad WC, right, we're turning our namespace into an OLE server. Quad WC window create OLE server, so that's names in the namespace scope. Then we're going to save this workspace, APLOLE.dws. So that's just so that I'm not muddying up my original namespace, which -0 to 9. You can see that creating the OLE server has injected a load of methods and stuff into that namespace now. All that remains is two things, but I'm going to pretend it's one thing until it doesn't work. File, export, and then I'm going to choose in-process server. Nope, not in-process server. Saves as a DLL. And it looks all good until it could not register in process server. And that's because you actually have to make sure to remember to start Dyalog and run it as an administrator so that you have permissions, to make changes to the registry. Yep, so don't forget to start Dyalog, run as administrator to make sure you have permissions to make changes to the registry. So I am going to have to once again change directory here. We can now just load APL OLE, the workspace I was dealing with before, and the namespace has still got all of our OLE server stuff inside. So now, yep, as I was saying, file, export, and we want to select in-process server, this DLL. Now you can see everything's green, that means good. The last thing to do is go to Excel itself. So for this I have pre-prepared another workbook called APLOLE.xlsm, and that means it contains macros, which is in this case VBA code, so Visual Basic for Applications. What are the things to remember? Thing number one to remember is I've created this OLE server DLL, but I can't use it yet. I have to go to C, the default place is C, program files, Dyalog, the correct version 17.1, and in the Dyalog installation directory, you're going to look for, in that window where I created the DLL, in fact I can show you again, you have this little tick box, and I have runtime application ticked, and that means for me I'm going to want the RT Dyalog DLL. So this is Dyalog 17.1.64 RT Unicode from the Dyalog installation directory. I'm going to copy that and then pop it over here. So that's putting the Dyalog DLL in the same directory as the DLL I've just made. And the second thing to not forget is you might not by default have the developer tab in Excel. So you'll want to go to File, Options, and then Customize Ribbon, and make sure that in the main tabs the developer tab is checked here. Now we can view code, and this will take you to the sort of VBA editor and debugger. And it will take you to sort of a code block for just the sheet you're in. If you want to have, and this is what I wanted, hold on, let's pop these side by side, this, like this, and then we can drag you across a bit. I wanted the fact, so you know, when you start using Excel, you learn about like equals, sum, 1, 2, 3, and these types of functions that you can call from within the cells. And obviously when you're in school learning this or wherever, it's it's mysterious, it's Excel code hidden within, you don't really know much about it. Maybe you learn a bit of VBA, and then it starts to become less mysterious. If you want to create your own such functions, you want to right click, insert module. So we insert a module, and then in our module 1 here, this code, including these functions, is now accessible from inside these Excel cells. So I've pre-written this stuff so far. One is the echo, which is literally just returning whatever I send it, but it's sending my text to a Dyalog process, or to the Dyalog OLE server that I created, and you've got to give it a minute for it to wake up the first time. After that, everything's instantaneous, pretty much, or as long as your actual functions take. So there we go, it's echoed my text back to me. Yep. And the main, and here, as I said, I'll pop all of this stuff on a GitHub repo somewhere, but the main takeaways are you want to create some object, which is the OLE server, and you refer to that with a string that's just Dyalog dot the name of the namespace that you created in Dyalog and exported. And then you can just dot into that object to call the functions within that namespace. It's actually quite easy. The other annoying thing was I could get it working sort of as one number at one cell at a time functions fairly straightforwardly, but if you want to do the sort of the real more array stuff where you can call the function, so let's do equals APL vowels. You want to call the function by clicking and dragging a range, then you need to remember to convert the values in the range into an VBA array before you can send it to Dyalog or to your APL functions. So I've created this little utility here called range to array. It takes a range and returns a variant, which is just the dynamically typed. It could be an array, it could be an integer, it could be a string or anything. That's just convenient. And then it just populates a new actual array object thing with an array, it populates it with the values from the range I've selected. And this means I don't have to go equals APL vowels C2, and then in the next one C3, and then do the little corner click and drag. Instead, I can just select a whole range and look. It's just the vowels. The fact that I can create my own Excel equals, in cell equals functions that are written in APL. That's why this was my favorite. This is my favorite demo of them of all the ones today. I think this is just pretty neat. The other thing is transpose the output so that it becomes columns. By default, my functions are returning vectors. So just one last thing, and I haven't seen any particular questions from anyone on the way, but I will leave time at the end for that. One last thing, let's create the wrapper for the primes. So this is function APL primes. The first time you want to case it how you want. Afterwards, Microsoft takes care of the rest. So it's R as range, as variant. And then we're basically going to copy all of the stuff that sets the object up and assigns the values from my range into an array, because that's all going to be the same. And I'm also going to copy the transpose out part, because I also want to return columns. So this will be APL primes equals this transpose. Okay, and then all I have to do is write the function call. Applewurst dot just primes array. Now, with any luck, and so VBA kind of compiles as you go, which sometimes when you make a typo is really annoying. But when you type everything right, as I've practiced this a bit, all I did was write that. I haven't clicked anything else, and I can do equal APL primes, click and drag and select all my cells and press enter. Right? I don't know. I think it's just a tiny, as mundane as using APL with Excel is as a topic. There's a little bit of magic in being able to do that. So yeah. So we can save all this, close everything up, all good, fine and dandy. I tell you what, the gods of live demos have shined on me today very nicely. Apart from my own fumbling around, everything worked. So yeah, it's pretty sweet. Yeah. But as I say, fairly basic stuff. Although that does cover, to my mind, your three main entry points. You're either dealing with the files, and you don't care about having Excel installed at all, or you want to control Excel from your Dyalog application that's running, and you can do things like writing graphs, making Excel produce graphs and stuff in that way, or you want to have your APL functions accessible from Excel. That's how you do it. So yes, to recap, APL to Excel and Excel to APL are, as of now, on this second repository, that's RIKEDYP, they have some updates which allow the tools to be used cross-platform. So that's macOS, Windows, or Linux. I cannot vouch for Raspberry Pi personally, but the Carlyle Group one is just .NET Framework on Windows as of right now. And that's, these are the tools for handling files very easily without having Excel installed. and then the OLE stuff. Finally, let me point you to where I found out this stuff and where you can go if you want to find out more. I hear there's no questions yet. That's probably fine. I'm sorry. It has taken up the best part of an hour showing all this. So firstly, the Dyalog documentation. You're going to find the Microsoft Windows installation and configuration guide useful. To find out a lot of the stuff about installation directories, Dyalog DLLs, stuff like that. The Windows Interfaces Guide and the .NET Framework Interface Guide, and coming in version 18, the comparison of .NET Framework Core interfaces, since we'll have the .NET Core Bridge, which allows you to use a lot of .NET-y things cross-platform, which is super convenient. And then other than so that was the main documentation. And then also, as I mentioned right near the beginning, Richard Proctor's excellent workshop materials. So he has previously run a few workshops. I guess you could write VBA, I assume that's VBA, yep. Typo from Adam. Dialog boxes for users to enter data and then feed to an APL process. Of course you could. So I think I have some old VBA code where, the macros include a button on the sheet, and you click the button and it opens a file chooser box, and then you're selecting a spreadsheet and then processing some stuff. Never mind, Josh answered in the chat. Sorry, back to, So from Dyalog user meetings, these workshops, so a lot of the stuff I've covered today, or basically all of it, is in here, but also much more, which, as I say, it's covered, whole workshops before, and frankly, everything you could do could cover a week-long course, probably. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and it's not just Excel as well. You can interact with PowerPoint or Word. Frankly, that's giving me ideas, but not got the time to invest right now. So in terms of finding this, if you just Google charting the APL Excel waters, I don't know if my search history has skewed it, but I'm pretty sure it comes up at least on the first page of Google. So it's easy to find. So while I wait for just the last call for questions, the next upcoming webinars next week, the British APL Association is having another Zoom meeting, sort of general meeting hosted by Paul Grosvenor. And then in 2 weeks, Adam is back talking about yet more of the many brilliant language features coming in Dyalog version 18. So had one a couple weeks ago, and there's definitely another one in 2 weeks' time, and quite possibly maybe 2 more, I think, at least. Did we say 4? Yeah, Adam can, decide how many. Otherwise, I want to say thank you very much for watching, putting up with my technical fumbling. I want to say thank God the demos themselves worked, even if my keyboard shortcuts for OBS are apparently ill-placed. Otherwise, let's get that jingle one more time, why not? Excel formula that created the data. Oops, a question. So I've been asked, can you see the Excel formula that created the data? Which data? I think I manually if you're asking about these workbooks, I manually created them myself. Like I just typed in some words and numbers for the sake of a demo. Can you clarify? possibly. Can you see the Excel formula that created the data? I mean, if you're talking about the macro, then I mean the functions are APL functions, and the macros, the VBA is just a wrapper so that we can call the functions in this way. I'm not sure I fully understand. Question. Again, let me know. What I can do is just hop on Dyalog TV myself. You know, if anyone's watching this back after the fact, then you know, you can leave. You can leave now. I'm just waiting for questions. Yeah, okay. Alice, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. Oh. Let's say the values are results of formulas. Oh, I see. Personally, I suspect not. I haven't investigated. That's a really good question. If people are up for sticking around, give me a couple moments. Let me attempt to... Yeah. Okay, I get what you mean now. Let's have a little look-see. So what we can do is we go back here. Gosh, it's going to be... If anything, that'll be in like OLE documentation. So you'll have to Google stuff and probably read a lot of VBA code on Stack Exchange forums to find out. So, yeah, I know what you mean now, Ellis. What you mean is, let's get through this. I just want to... Workbook gets workbook open, and then it's this guy. I'm going to copy that path, get rid of the double quotes. Huh? Eh? Oh, sorry. Is it workbooks.open? Yep, okay. And then excel.visible is 1. And so here we are. And what is meant is, in here we could have a cell where the actual value comes from equals the sum of some cells like this. And the question is, and I don't know the answer, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to find the answer right now for you, to be honest, without Googling, and that's going to be boring. So what I do promise is, if I go away after this and actually find the answer, I will make sure that knowledge is available in the description of the YouTube video that this becomes, and you know, find a way to let you know, Ellis. But so the idea is then you can do workbook.sheets1 dot data. No. One dot name. Yeah. Why can't I see the data? What's okay. Workbook sheets 1. Oh yeah, okay, sorry, it's the workbook. This is why I had it as a demo before. Used range value 2. Right. Yeah, I mean, so reading the value 2, obviously not, right? Because that's just the value that's in there. But presumably, okay, I'm willing one quick Google. VBA get formula from cell. Get formula back from cell, and okay, So we got used range dot. Okay, there is the thing. Aha, there you go. Yes, the answer is yes, you can. It's a Christmas miracle. I just Googled it. By the way, I Googled, the exact term was VBA get formula from cell, and the top answer indicates that if you look in workbook, within a sheet object, if you look in a particular range, I just used range to get all of this. But if you look in a particular range and then do dot formula, you can indeed retrieve the formula back. So, okay, well, thanks, Josh. You look at this. Look at this. I mean, I know that there's like a 30-second delay. I'm guessing Josh Googled it about the same time I did. Go away. Yep. So the answer is yes, you can. Any more for any more? Because otherwise, I'm definitely gonna have to. Go on, one more. I'm hearing nothing back, so I'm going to call it. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching. See you at the next ones.